So in the future we can
Sure.
share this with other students. Yeah.
Sure, that's fine.
So the core of how we set this up
go ahead.
was essentially that my laptop could only handle the levels, but Nick's desktop could handle everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Basically.
Is this a laptop
so kind
or
of
workstation?
The way, it's a desktop, yeah. So basically kind of the way that we were doing it was we would export 3ds Max Datasmith file, and then Maddie would import it into a level onto her computer, and then she would kind of just give me the whole folder with all the assets in the level, and then I'd kind of just drop that into the project. So if I open just like the level, the way it looks right now is that it basically only has the geometry for the whole building, and then it has all of the kind of trigger boxes and everything that we had for opening the doors and like the blueprints and stuff. As well as right now I have a light mass importance volume so that way when you do the light build, it'll focus on the buildings rather than just kind of focusing on everything around it.
Just to clarify, Nick, this is something I think in Unreal you can drag a volume which is called post. This is called post effect.
It's a light mass importance volume. Yeah.
Right. So it's basically baking the light in a higher, more precise resolution within this bounding box.
Yeah. Yep. And I found that somewhat it reduces the amount of time it takes to do the light builds, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
because you were talking about the light map, I do want to talk a little bit more, because I think that's a concept you might not be familiar. A light map basically is how Unreal handle this kind of pre-baked lighting information. So when you play the game, the engine is not trying to retrace the light in real time, because that's very slow and costs a lot of memory. So what the Unreal do is it will pre-bake the lighting information into the UV, into the texture type of package. So that's a light map called. And because we have a really large site, right, as you know, is a couple of miles long, that map, I believe, is not being baked. So the only thing being baked is individual building, correct, Nick?
Yeah. Yep, pretty much.
Okay.
So yeah, then you just have a default. You have a level that only has your building in it, and the lights that are associated with the building. Like I have a light in the garage because you can't see anything without it. But basically, you just want an empty level, so that way then you go back to your kind of full level volume. I'll go back to my building. That way, when you go to window levels like you were showing before, you can go to this button that says add existing, and then you can add whatever level you want. So I'll go back to NC, open it, but it won't let me because I already have it in there. But basically that's just the way that you'll add the level, and it'll start at whatever default 0, 0 is for your building. And then I found a really good way to organize those files is to just have a folder in that level that you put everything into. So that way when you're in kind of the full map, you can just see every map as a folder rather than kind of all the assets floating.
Good point.
So that way I can kind of select all, if I right click, go to select all descendants, it'll pick everything in that level, and then I can move that level as a whole piece instead of kind of worrying about if I have everything or not.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, this is all lined up in the 0, 0, right, anchor point. So it will be important before you make empty or make a new level, you know the location of your building. So it's a good idea you already positioned your building in the right spot. So when you're loading into level, we don't have to move it around.
Yeah, you can do it that way too.
Or you could put in the folder and then later tell Nick or Maddie, hey, can you grab all the pieces in my level and relocate to a certain spot, right? Either way.
Yeah. And like, if we look at something like the rescue team, that's kind of what I did, is I just imported it at 0, and then asked them kind of where it should go on the site. And same with Amy's building as well, for the working homeless building. Placing it relative to where they wanted it on the site. Yeah.
Very cool. So once you load a level in, do you ever unload that level? Or is it always
so right now for
persistent?
these ones, yeah, I left them loaded always. But you can have it, if you right click on a level and go to change streaming method, you can have it so that way it loads by a blueprint, or it's always loaded. When you do a blueprint, then you can use like trigger volumes to change if it's loaded or unloaded, depending on if you're in the volume or not.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, we have everything kind of persistent.
Yep, everything's persistent right now.
All right.
But it's all broken up so that way you can kind of turn off individual levels if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm. All right. So in this case, it doesn't really save much computing power, right? Because everything is persistent. But from the management perspective, this is pretty helpful, because you don't have to worry about, hey, there's something missing in that level. I have to, relink or repoint to the right objects. That's good.
Yeah, and it made it really helpful for Maddie to be able to assemble the project, like those individual buildings, and then for me to be able to take those from her and kind of then place them all on the site. Mm-hmm. So it made working as a team kind of easier to do it as levels.
All right, very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Maddie, you want to add anything?
I think you got most of it. I think pretty much the core of why this was easy was an obsessive organization of folders. If you click on either of ours, Nick, you can see, I had issues with some of our animations, so those would come in different folders. So every single time it was a different folder, which meant when I was importing levels, it was like when I was working on the individual levels and importing stuff and trying to line up the FBX animations on top of the Datasmith, everything was very nicely organized and not trying to guess where everything was. And then it was much easier to copy everything over and keep it together. So that's why everybody gets their own little initial folders and things named accordingly.
Wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. I do want to ask a question about, actually two questions. One is on the instance, which is the efficient way you can reduce the memory load. My second question is about the level blueprint, because we have multiple levels, and I believe Maddie and Nick, you have some blueprint operate in your level rather than in the actors. So I'd like you guys talk a little bit about these two tricks. So maybe we can start with the instance. Maybe Maddie could be the one using the rescue team as example. Since we have multiple buildings from the rescue team, right? Couple of duplicated buildings. So I want you to actually go to their folder, go to the content folder, and let's take a quick look on how many buildings is actually referenced to the same parent or the same origin, if you call that way. So here, Nick, maybe you can just click a tent, right? In a thing, just click any tent.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
You can see this tent is referenced to the content. What's the name? It's too small for me to read.
10-10.
Okay. But if you look at other tent, I think they all reference to the same one.
Yep. Yeah, so I just switched. So basically, if I always select the tent, you'll always see that the mesh is the static tent mesh between all the different groups of them.
Right.
So it's always the same thing.
Correct.
So it's one geometry, being that it's like one physical object that Unreal is thinking about, and then it can tell that there is a bunch of different times that object is used. So when you adjust it over in this details panel that Nick was just showing, it means you can adjust it once and it'll happen everywhere. But if all of a sudden you realize one of your tents is wrong and you need to get rid of it, you can still click on it because it hasn't completely combined itself with everything else.
Yeah,
Right.
so if I wanted to change the material for the tent here, I could use this kind of green material and it'll compile for a second.
Right. So that is the instance.
And then you
in
can
a
change
stage.
it per, you can change it in the stage, but then if I were to go to open the mesh, which I think you should probably be able to see, if I changed it in here, and then hit save, it would change it everywhere for all of the tents.
Correct. Right. So in order to get this is from Datasmith, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in order to do this, in Max, I think Jamie probably can confirm, you have to duplicate objects as instance rather than duplication or copy. It's very similar terminology like in SketchUp or Rhino, you do a block, right? So the multiple objects will share the same origin. And when you transfer through Datasmith, that instance will be respected later in Unreal. Wonder if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I just grouped all my materials like together for like one singular unit, like, and then after I grouped those materials together for a unit, then I made that a group, and then I copied that group as an instance all over, and then exported it.
Right. So this is a very important trick if you want to do, let's say, a village, right, with a lot of hubs. You don't want to drag down performance. So using instance is the key to keep the frame rate high. All right. The similar question I noticed from Amy's file, also in Christian's hotel or Maddie, your hub. There's a lot of furnitures inside. I'm pretty sure these furnitures are from Revit, right? Seems like from
Correct.
Revit. Are they instance or they are just bringing in as kind of independent from each other?
I believe they're all independent from each other. Unfortunately, we learned how much easier that is after we'd done enough work.
I think some of it was when the way Maddie did hers, some of the like arrays or like way she copied things, it did copy them as instances. Because if I click on like this table over here, the mesh is that 520175. And then if I click on the other one, the mesh is the same. So I think some of the stuff kind of carried over, but other things didn't do the same.
All right. So it depends on where you did the copy, right? If you did a copy in Revit,
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
it became independent, or we call redundant, right, in terms of computing. But if you duplicate it here within Unreal, it will be an instance, correct?
Well, she did copy
These
it.
were entirely in Revit. It is just simply how I occasionally arrayed them, and they would be done as groups versus other things where I just copied them. And the transition into Max for some things kept that knowledge, and other things it didn't, since it never existed. But
I
issue
I
also
assume,
in Max.
Maddie, for the kitchen sinks, are they duplicated in Max or they are done in Revit?
Revit.
Okay.
I did none of my modeling in Max, unfortunately.
All right, so this is all Revit. So in this case, the kitchen sinks, they are referencing to two different origin in content, correct?
So similar to like what we were talking about before with the instancing, is that the mesh for it is actually the same. Like if I just changed, because I just changed it in the mesh, they are kind of the same.
So that's great. So that means Revit actually, how to say, this is the component in Revit, right? So the Revit component is actually being respected as instance here. That's great. Can you try, I know maybe the bed, is a bed, is the similar, do you have another bed in the...
Yes.
Yeah.
There is another bed we would be able to
Could
check
you
with.
try it?
Sure. Which piece did that change? Oh, first.
Okay.
So it does it. So, yeah, so it didn't do it on this one instance, but I think there's another instance somewhere else that it did do it on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, it did it on this one over here.
I see.
Also.
This maybe
Or
are
maybe that's
split
the
into two type of files.
Mm-hmm.
This, depends on how they were made, right? In Revit, maybe they're
Yeah, I
not
think so.
exactly identical. In
So
Revit.
that is the exact same family, but the way I placed some things in Revit was using the array command, and anything that I arrayed or that stayed in array will read as the same thing because an array treats it similar to an instance. But things that were just placed individually repeatedly did not copy over the same way.
Huh. Interesting. That is a really wonderful trick.
Pure chance that we figured that out. But
Yeah, but it did make it nice when changed the materials for her stuff.
Okay, so you better use array instead of drop component individually.
also just saves you a ton of time.
Yeah, I learned this when I do the columns, because when we model depth, there's a lot of columns. And I noticed we have the cylindrical shape for the columns. And I assume, well, that will be just like a one instance, right? But actually not. Depends on the height. Depends on if you change the radius a little bit. It will treat it as two separate columns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So the lesson learned maybe here is in Revit you should use component, right, if you can, and you should use array, right, to make duplications if you can. That will save you a lot of memory later in Unreal.
Yeah.
Cool.
Or it could be that you build it without kind of the furniture, like some of the like extra kind of tables and furniture and stuff. Then you just place those in Unreal later. Would also be another way to do it.
Right.
Like some of the cabinets and stuff you need to have built in because they're a specific thing goes in whatever place. But the tables and chairs and furniture could be done in Unreal.
Can you change this to wireframe? I want to see the kitchen sink. How many polygons does it actually carry in? It's a little bit higher than each needed, but that's all right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they can definitely be optimized before bringing in.
Yeah.
All right. Is the same procedure for Amy? I know Amy's project is done in Revit as well.
Yeah, she gave me the Datasmith and FBX for her animation. So all three of her buildings are actually in one Datasmith file, so that made it pretty easy for me in terms of getting the level set up for them.
Great.
And then there's that animated garage door and some of the animated doors that come in as a separate file.
All right. So you have to put the door in the right location?
Yeah.
All right, that's a lot of doors.
You can drag all of the doors at once if you're careful.
All right. Is this the same way you animated your doors, Maddie? You make one animation, then you duplicate in Unreal.
As much as I could, unfortunately, there's a lot of different sizes on mine, so the one pot I animated still needed 4 animations, but you could reuse the same door. So here you can see kind of how that had to play out. And they're a little bit of a pain to line up. I'm not gonna lie, but whenever we tried it with Datasmith, so trying to get lots of things in at once, it would break. And mine in particular, and Amy ran into the same issue with such weird angles. trying to animate them in Max is just a pain. So it's part of why mine is broken up into so many different pieces.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like, it was really easy so Nyx and Christians were easy to get in much more together than they are here. But for the weird angles, it got a lot easier to bring them into a couple different pieces just because they got angry with being at such abnormal angles.
So the solution is you just make one blueprint, right, with this animated curtain wall, and then you duplicate this in Unreal, and then just reorient based on the individual settings. I think this is the efficient way because you don't have to worry about repeat the same blueprint over and over. It's just using the same blueprint. It will save the computing time as well.
Yeah, that's what the man doors do.
Yeah, so that's what we did for the doors that I have in mine. Is that we just made a blueprint, which I'll open, that just has kind of the door and then a box for collision, and then in that it has the kind of animation, how the animation set up that we did in the level blueprints for the other things. But since we knew that this one door, which was just made kind of at 0, that we'd be using it twice, I just put it in the blueprint and then did it that way.
All right. Very good. So you have two animations, one open, one closed, correct?
No. So it's actually only one animation that plays backward by the flip-flop, which Maddie was talking about kind of before.
Yeah.
So that's a negative play rate and then plays it backwards when you
that is smart.
Go through it again.
So in 3ds Max, you didn't animate the door closed. You just animated the door open, correct?
Right. It takes a lot less effort, it seems.
That is actually, I think this is a smarter strategy than the tutorial I made. I actually did 2 animations. But that's good. You just reverse the play rate to negative.
Yeah, you can. Nyx shell is also kind of fancy in that sense, where it's just a flip-flop with different buttons.
With the
button has a play rate at a certain one, and then the other button has the negative play rate of the exact same thing.
Right.
So that whenever you go in, which it'll work both ways, but then on the doors that you just want to walk through, it's a flip-flop, so they just automatically switch whenever it did. It just does the opposite. Nice.
And since you have this sliding door only once, did you did this in level blueprint or is in the actor?
So we originally were doing it in the level blueprint, but then when we wanted to start adding the functionality to be able to kind of have it show the text that kind of pops up telling you how to operate it, then I put it into a blueprint. Because the nice thing about the blueprint is that it can all be one contained thing.
Right.
Where this is the mesh here, the box, and then I have text on both sides. It's actually just set to not visible right now.
Good.
So that way that'll show up. And then I have another thing set up that'll toggle the visibility of showing those texts once you walk into the box. So that way it's not just always there.
Great. I think this is good. You might, in the future want to reuse this small cabin multiple location, right? So by doing this in an actor rather than in a level, it gives you the freedom later. You can make as many as you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it made it just simple to do when it overlaps with the box. Then you toggle the visibility of the text, and then when you do the opposite, it disables.
Right. Okay. Very cool. So what is in the level blueprint then? So we have multiple levels. I know in the persistent level, or we call the site all, right? That's the overall. I think I put a bunch of level blueprint there to control the menu or to control the teleportation.
Yeah, and actually the teleportation one you did as a blueprint too, not in the level blueprint.
You are right.
Just a blueprint already.
So what is in the level now? Can you zoom in?
So this is the level blueprint here. So it has the load game info, where it opens your menu. And then it also has the blueprint that I added for opening the settings when you hit escape, and that way you can leave the game.
Control the resolution or the
yeah, all of that
frame
stuff.
rate. Yeah, that's great. So that's the only thing in the level. We don't have the trigger box anymore, right?
Correct. So what's the nice thing about the way we were doing it, also with all of the buildings being on their own individual levels, is that each level has their own level blueprint. And when you bring them into the persistent level, they still keep all of that blueprint information.
Right.
So if we were to open like Maddie's blueprint, you would see all of her kind of animations for her doors in that level blueprint, which still carries over into the other one.
I see.
When you play the game.
So Maddie, you actually put all the door animation in the level.
Yeah.
With the trigger box. Okay. Yeah, I got it. This is now I understand what you mean. It takes a lot of time to orient yeah. Cool, that's good. I think that's a good kind of demonstration how the large project in Unreal, if you have a group of people work together, this might be the efficient way you can organize folders and the levels. In order to keep each one still kind of independent, so you don't have a headache. You want to try to make one blueprint talk with every single piece in a level. Great. Is there anything else you guys think we should pay attention if we redo it, next semester? Anything we kind of missed in the beginning, or we should better prepare for the next round?
I think that the second you have CGC computers, everything is going to go so much easier.
Yes. Exactly. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 cut everything short.
I think a lot of this is probably the more simplified version, but a lot of the weird level and animation things would have been easier if it wasn't limited based on what my laptop can handle.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think inherently just being able to work in the same space will simplify most of the issues we had.
Yeah. Good point. It also, I think, is a big burden. You have to keep your frame rate as reasonable when you work on the laptops. I think I keep talking about the frame rate or the number of polygons you have to kind of maintain the budget of your geometry. This won't be as bad or as constrained if we work in a high-end workstation. You might not need to cut down your budget, the polygon budget, to a really low number as what we did. For instance, the whole landscape, right? All the trees, the forest, also the terrain, we all maintain as a super low poly in order to make it playable on the laptop. But I guess there's a lot of techniques we really have no time to cover, such as level of detail, LOD, how to control that in Unreal, also like light map, how to bake light map with appropriate resolution. We don't have time to cover that. Also, there's other tricks, like if you have thousands of trees on the screen, what would be the efficient way you manage these trees? You can use fog, for example, to block a lot of trees so they are not rendered in your view. There's tricks about the lighting information on the shadow, how to bake. So they are all somehow relevant. But anyhow, I think this is a start point for all of you to be aware, this powerful engine. I think in the future, there's a lot of things you can continue to learn, to explore. Hopefully this is just a start point. All right, so let me stop the video recording